Yeah, so I was just saying we're just giving a little intro to the session. So I'm going to tell you a story and tell you a bit about my journey as a community storyteller. So I call myself a community story weaver, and I work with Befriend in Perth, Western Australia. And we have a number of different community building areas in the suburbs of Perth. And I tell stories, and I also gather stories, and I share them back. So that's what I mean by story weaving. And I came to this back in 2018. I went to Orkney, and I went to listen to a traditional oral storyteller on our last night there. And it just lit me on fire. It was just like, where is this in my life? Why don't I get to hear these stories anymore? And remembering how much I'd loved them as a child. And something about the way, the aliveness, of not just reading a story or having it read to you, but actually seeing it come alive in a way that would never be repeated. And the way that she moved around the room, and she had all these beautiful murals and props, and it was so beautiful. So I came from that night, I thought, right, how do I become a storyteller? So I came back to Western Australia, where I was a creative writing teacher in rural WA in Denmark in the southwest. And I had a community practice of building community through creative writing. And I had a friend who was a theatre director, and we'd done lots of spoken word performances together. So I went to her and I said, can you help me create an oral storyteller development program? And she, bless her, said yes. And so we put together this 9-month program that began with a very experienced Canadian storyteller coming down and doing a weekend intensive with us all. And then we would gather monthly for weekends, and we were making it up as we were going along. We had no idea what we were doing. And we took our participants, 12 of them, on a very long winding path towards how to learn a story, how to tell it confidently. And they persevered, and in the end most of them performed at Brave New Works Festival in 2019. But at the end of that, I thought I really need to go to somebody who knows a bit more about this, and learn from someone who's been doing this for a long time. So I went to England, to Emerson College, where they have a 13-week storytelling course. And I did that, and it was during COVID, so I had to come back home and finish it online. And that was amazing. It was such a journey. And from that, when the pandemic, the lockdown finished, I went to a local Befriend group. I didn't know anything about Befriend at that point in time. And I met the local community builder, and she told me how Befriend works and how it's about taking a gift or a passion that you have and sharing it as a host for free in the community. And Befriend supports you to find a venue, find the people, promote it. They come along and they support you with inclusive practices. So this is what I did. And I had a group that met for a couple of terms, where I taught them creative writing and storytelling based on what I had learned at Emerson. And that group is still going. One of the members of that group, who was my co-host at that time, then became the host, and she's still running it. And they have formed really deep friendships. And I often go along and visit, and they tell me, some of the things they've told me is that this is one of the few places where they feel like they get to talk about some of the deeper experiences of their life, and to really reflect on what their journey means, and where they've been, and the gifts that they have gathered from some of the difficult struggles that they've been through. So yeah, they're a very rock solid group, and a whole bunch of us, of them and me, went to study with another storyteller in Perth, who had a very different approach to teaching story from the Emerson one. And that's the approach I'm going to share with you today, because it's really, it's very low key, but it's also just kind of throwing you in and getting you an immediate experience of retelling a story, the one that I'm going to tell to you, and discovering very quickly that you have your own natural way of telling stories, your own voice, and you can really trust that. And it's so this isn't about performance storytelling. It's not about, you know, some kind of polished delivery with all sorts of flourishes. It's just hearthside. We call it hearthside storytelling. So I would love to hear from each of you, and I'll just bring up, oh yeah, we've got that slide up. So maybe you could either share in the chat box, or if you're willing, share with me your name, where you're coming from, maybe the traditional owners of the land that you're on, and just very briefly a folk tale or a fairy tale or a myth that you remember as meaningful, and what brings you here today. So just you know, like a minute or so each, a couple of minutes. Oh, I'm not showing my screen. Oh, can you not share? Oh, sorry. Oh, that's really weird. I thought I was. Okay. Where has that gone? Ah. I told you I wasn't a PowerPoint gal.
I will start. My name's Marilyn. I pronouns she and her. I am in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, New Zealand. So the traditional owners of the land are Māori, and their history is through oral storytelling. There was no other documentation of it, and that has created challenges because the history of the country has been recorded, including their own stories, with a very colonial lens. So I think that's my interest in storytelling, is from that side. And so then to think of the fairy tale or the story, it would be New Zealand was a whale that was fished up from the ocean with Maui, which is a Māori legend.
Beautiful.
That's me.
Thank you. Have you heard of Belly of the Whale Storytelling School in New Zealand? I'm connected to a group of storytellers there. You might like to look them up, and one of them's published a beautiful book of stories, traditional stories about food. Joanne, can I call on you next?
Yeah, sure. I'm also from Tamaki Makaurau. Well, that's where I live. I'm Australian originally. Yeah, and there's a whole series of tribes that have at various different times been in these lands. Maori tribes. I'm interested in storytelling because I think it's very powerful. It's a powerful way to connect to other humans. And importantly, it's a powerful way to motivate funding and capture the essence of what you're doing. So I think storytelling is probably slightly underrated. In terms of a folktale or fairy tale, I can't really think of any from my childhood. Like when I think back then, I just think of like Aesop's fables and things like that. We used to read those. My son really loved a book with a traditional Maori folktale called Battle of the Mountains, and I read that many, 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 many times when he was a preschooler over 10 years ago. And I love it because it talks about mountains that are in the New Zealand landscape in the centre of the North Island near Lake Taupo. So it's just so cool to have a story that's about all the big mountains that are just on the land, and I love that. And it talks about how they were fighting over a lover, you know, over a smaller mountain that was the lady, and then one of them got annoyed and went walking off, and then suddenly something happened, and then he stopped, and that's Taranaki. So I really like that story because it just captures the physical landscape.
Yes.
Yeah, and they were volcanoes, and they threw rocks and fire when they got angry. So that was pretty cool, which is why my son loved it as well.
Yes. Yeah, imagine if geography was taught that way in school.
It'd be a bit more memorable, probably.
Wouldn't it? Yes.
If you can do it with financial reports, I'll be indebted to you forever.
I wish. Yes. Janine, would you like to introduce yourself? Or Carla? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was trying to turn on my camera, but I don't know why it says I can't. I'm sitting here with my husband, Jim. So, pardon?
Sorry, your camera did come on briefly, so there must be something. There's a button there somewhere.
Okay, well, I'm here with my husband, so both of us are going to participate. So while I fiddle with the camera, maybe he can start.
Video settings. Oh, me.
Yeah.
My name is Jim. I was born in Ghana, and I grew up in Zambia, Swaziland, and lately Southern Africa. And I think the history of the area we're in now is predominantly Zulu history, because we're in KwaZulu-Natal, and this is the Zulu nation around us, and most of the stories around here are Zulu proverbs and Zulu historical stories. But the short story I want to tell actually is from Swaziland, and I've always enjoyed it. The Swazi people say that when the early white explorers started coming to Swaziland, they were shown various landmarks, and they were shown a river. And in the river, there were hippopotamus swimming and messing around in the river. And one of them did what hippos always do, which is blow water through its nose. So they make a big noise when they spray a whole lot of water into the air. And the Swazi guide that was with the early explorer said in Siswati, how? Ipuputamanzi, which means how is an expression of surprise, how. Puputa means to blow, to spit out, and manzi is water. So the white guy heard this, Puputamanzi, and he thought, oh, he's giving the animal its name. He's telling me what they call this creature. So he said then, oh, this must be, and it became hippopotamus. But in fact, the guy was saying it's blowing water. And I've always enjoyed that story because it demonstrates the lack of understanding often between different cultures, because we live in a very cross-cultural society here and in Swaziland.
Yes.
I've always enjoyed that story as a demonstration of that.
Yeah, I think that's another great value of revitalizing and sharing these traditional tales, is that we get more of a window into all those different cultures around the world. Thank you, Jim.
So my name is Janine. I was born here in South Africa of Swiss and Scottish heritage, but I consider myself a total South African. And yes, as Jim says, our country is riddled with division and disaster from before, with apartheid and all of that stuff. And my own story is slightly different, that my parents were involved in the anti-apartheid struggle. So for me, I find as a white person that storytelling is a huge healing gift for us in this country. And it's a passion of mine to be able to create spaces where people can try to share their stories, because at the bottom of it all, when you do storytelling, I've been involved in things like the Human Library and things like that. At the bottom of it all, we're all just human beings. We're all just the same. And so to divide people by their race or their geography or their age or their gender is just so hurtful. And we've lived a very, very divided society up to now. So I'm really passionate about storytelling and finding those spaces where we can allow people just to be who they are, tell their stories, and 9.5 times out of 10, we find that healing, we find that connection, and we find that I'm so much more like you than anything else, and none of those other labels or divisions have any meaning in life. So yeah, that's me.
Yes, thank you, Janine. That I really resonate with what you're saying about the power of storytelling to connect, and the importance of creating those safe places where we can tell our stories to each other. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Carla, would you like to share something?
I didn't expect to share anything. I live in Perth, Western Australia, and came here from, well, originally came from the Netherlands, and was absolutely delighted to leave the Netherlands as a child of 12 to come to the light of Australia. And I'm not familiar with the stories of my own country much at all. I don't identify much with that culture, and I admire the Aboriginal stories very much, from what the ones that I have come across, that I have listened to, but they're not very many so far. So I look forward to hearing more. Yeah, that's. I am very interested in storytelling because I'm recognizing more and more the power of it, and the comments I've heard from the participants. Like, you can capture the essence of what you are doing via your story. That particularly appeals to me because because of what I'm busy doing in various ways. So, but also storytelling, I just enjoy it so much to do it, to tell a story. I've got 2 grandchildren, and when I tell a story, I recognize, how much they enjoy it. So I'm very much with them when I'm telling a story.
Beautiful. Thank you, Carla. So yeah, our numbers are growing. So if people are welcome to pop a short intro in the chat, and if there's anyone else who'd particularly like to share their story and turn their camera on, you're welcome. And otherwise, we might get started. So okay. So the story that I'm going to share with you today is, actually, I'll just unshare my screen so we can see each other better. And welcome to the others who are here. David, Gavin, Howard, Mahoe, and Lisa, Janine. Yeah. So the story that I'm going to share with you today, I've told it a couple of times to adults, and I'm going to be telling a slightly modified, more interactive version of it this Saturday to an intergenerational playgroup with a bunch of elders and children. And it was given to me by a UK storyteller named Cassandra Y, who some of you may have heard of. She works in the disability and inclusion space, and I've adapted it a little bit. And it's originally a story from Indonesia, from Java, about a mango tree. So yeah, I will begin. So deep inside you, there is a tree. And this tree is made up of many, many parts. Well, once upon a forest, the parts of the tree got into an argument with each other. And the storytellers say that the complaints began with the roots. The roots were grumbling away to each other down in the soil, and they were saying, "Our life is the hardest of all." Well, the rest of the tree said, Why is your life the hardest of all?" And the roots said, our life is the hardest of all because we're always digging down, down, deeper and deeper into the soil, looking for food and water to feed the rest of the tree. And nobody notices. Our work is invisible. Well, the trunk of the tree laughed when it heard this. No, 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 it said, my life is the hardest of all. Why, said the rest of the tree. Why is your life the hardest of all? My life is the hardest of all because every year I have to die another death. I have to get bigger and bigger and grow another ring on my outside so that I can hold up the weight of this great tree, this growing tree. Well, the branches of the tree heard this and they also laughed and they said, no, 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 our life is the hardest of all. And the rest of the tree said, why is your life the hardest of all? And the branches said, we're always having to stretch out and reach and climb and go out on a limb. We take such huge risks. And then children come along and they climb on us and they swing on us and we break. Our life is the hardest of all because we take the biggest risks and we're expendable. Well, the leaves heard this and they were all of a flutter and they said, no, 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 our life is the hardest of all. And the rest of the tree said, why is your life the hardest of all? And the leaves of the tree said, we are burnt by the sun and the wind comes and whooshes us away. And we're forgotten. Our life is the hardest of all because we are forgotten. Well, the fruit of the tree heard this, the mango fruit. And one of the mango fruits spoke up. And she said, no, no, no. Our life is the hardest of all. And the rest of the tree again said, why? Why is your life the hardest of all? And the mango fruit said, because we put such a lot of effort into growing into this perfect, round, lovely shape, and we become the most perfect color of orange with just a lovely blush of red, and we're sweet and juicy and perfect. And just at that moment, these birds come along and they start pecking at us and they knock us to the ground, and the people from the village come and they eat us up, and we're just gone in a moment. At that very moment that we're perfect, we get gobbled up. Well, as all the parts of the tree continued to squabble over who had the hardest life, who worked the hardest, there was another quieter voice that wasn't being heard or remembered at first. And this was the voice of the mycelium, of the fungal, the wood wide web that is woven all through the fabric of the tree and all through the forest floor, and who we can think of as a kind of internet between the trees and between the parts of the forest. And this voice was whispering to them, saying, you have all forgotten. You've forgotten. Everything is connected, and none of us can thrive without the others. And it continued to whisper and whisper to them until at last they heard its voice and they listened to it, carrying the stories, carrying each of their stories between the different parts of the tree. And as they listened, they began to remember and to realize how each of them was giving and receiving, and all of them were depending upon them, on each other, and that they needed every single one of them to thrive. So I am going to just finish this story with a quote from Bruce Anderson, who some of you might know of from his work with the Core Gift Institute. And he says, your gifts rest deep in your bones. Yet when you give them, they become a visible and actionable oath, demonstrating over and over again your faith in the thread of life you're woven into. Your gifts rest deep in your bones. Yet when you give them, they become a visible and actionable oath, demonstrating over and over again your faith in the thread of life you are woven into. And that, my friends, is how this story ends and your storytelling adventure begins. So I'm going to pop up some questions to reflect upon and invite you. You can either reflect silently or you can take, let's see, say 10. Is everybody happy to do a little bit of reflective writing? Okay, so I will just share my screen. Yeah, so these are not for sharing. And just to reflect upon any of these questions that speak to you or that feel meaningful for you, to think about your work and your connection to community, and reflect on how this story speaks to you. And I will give you just until 10 past, so you've got about 8 minutes, 9 minutes. You can put up your hand signal if you finish sooner and you're ready to return. I'm not sure how everyone's going because I can't see most of you, but it looks like maybe a couple of you have might be ready to return. So if anyone needs more time, let me know, and otherwise we might regather for chat. Okay, so we are going to send you into breakout rooms now, and all of this that we're doing now, so the journal reflection, the silent reflection, and then talking with each other about how the story speaks to you, it's what we call story feeding in storytelling circles, and it's about building your relationship with the story, because the more that you integrate it and make sense of it in your own life, the more it will be in your bones, and the easier it will be to share with others. So we think of stories as being like living beings that we need to form a relationship with. And people often talk about carrying a story and how they might carry a story for many months or years even before they will tell it to others, so that it really has this deep kind of composting that happens in the connections between the story and your life. So I would like to invite you to take some time in a breakout room, and I think we'll, depending on the numbers, there'll be 2 or 3 of you in each room, and you'll have, we'll see how we go with the time, but maybe about 10 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes to have a chat about what was the image that most stayed with you, what image jumped out at you. So it's not about interpreting what does the story mean, it's just like, is there one image that stayed with you from the story, and what does it mean to you, how does it speak to you? And you may like to share something about your community practice or an area of your life that it feels like it touches on at the moment. Are there any questions? Okay. So Michelle, if you could send people into the breakout rooms, and I will stop sharing my screen. Hello, welcome back.
Hi.
Would anybody like to share anything here that stood out for them? Maybe a moment from the story and how that relates to your community practice. Otherwise, we will jump straight into the first method I'm going to teach you for learning a story. Okay, so it's called, what we're doing is making a list of the bones of the story. So every traditional tale is made up of an underlying structure. And in the storytelling tradition, we like to respect that structure. And particularly with myths, it's really important that we don't mess with traditional myths. But folk tales and fairy tales and wonder tales are a lot more mobile in terms of what you can do with them. So I am going to give you maybe just 5 minutes to write down the bones of the story as you remember it. And there might be, 8 to 12. This is a very short story, so I've got it down to about 8 bones, I think 8 or 9 bones. And a bone is like a news headline. like just like the key thing that happened in that part of the story. Any questions? Otherwise, just if you can write down your list of the story bones as you remember them. So just a really good way of integrating the story and the story structure. I could give them to you up front, but it's much better if you try and think of them yourself first.
I did try to email, but once back and it was a bad email. When after getting posted on and talk first aid, and just wondering.
I'm not sure who we can hear. I don't know.
Can you call on?
Sorry about that. Not sure where that was coming from. Just one more minute. Okay. So how did you go? Was it easy to remember? It was a pretty short story. All right, I'll just share with you what I have, and you can compare. There really is no right or wrong with this, and yeah, it's just how you remember it, and often that's one of the joys of storytelling is we all remember stories a little bit differently and might tell them a little bit differently or slightly different order. But that's what I had down for my bones. And then the next method, and I'm sharing this because it might be helpful for this next part, is I would like you to get has everybody got a blank piece of paper that they can put in front of them and rule up some lines on? I'm just going to show you an example. I don't have one for this particular story. I'm just going to show you like how bad these drawings can be. So can you all see this? Oh no, I better turn off the, hang on, I'll unshare. So this is called a storyboard, which some of you may have heard of. And you rule up your piece of paper into maybe 9 or 12 squares, and you just do a little sketch of key scenes from the story. And it's also again, the process of doing it, regardless of whether you ever look at it again, will really help to get the structure of the story into you. And yeah, so I'd just like you to give you like 5 to 8 minutes to do that now. And then after we've done this, you're going to have a go at retelling the story with each other. So it's all part of the preparation for that. And I will be back with you time? Just let me know when you're finished with your windows. Does anybody need more time, or are we ready to go? I'll assume we're ready. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is to share one of your windows, if you can hold it up to the camera, and then maybe tell us a little bit more about what you would imagine happening in that window. Or we can do this in breakout rooms if you're not so keen to do it in the big group. Maybe we'll do that. So Michelle, if you could send people into breakout rooms of 2 or 3. And so what you will be doing is talking, just show your little sketches to each other and talk about one of your windows and just open out the detail of what's happening in that little window. And we'll just do that for 5 minutes total before we come back together. Like a couple of minutes each. So just wait for Michelle to send us into breakout rooms.
Michelle, for numbers, do you need me to join? Because I've only just had a look at the story.
No, I put you, Bernie and Lisa in a room because none of you have done the activity. You've been listening. Bernie's running around chasing dogs in her pajamas and Lisa's getting kids ready for school. So,
okay, cool. I'll just hang here then.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry you missed the story. Oh, that's wonderful. And that was in Albany. Were you here? Was that recently? No. Yeah. So welcome back, everyone. And I hope that you're feeling a little bit more ready to have a go at telling the story to each other. And this is what I was saying at the beginning. This is what my mentor here in Perth did with us. When I was doing a storytelling apprenticeship course with her, she would send us off into groups of 2 or 3 or 4, and we just had a round robin where we'd pass the story around. So whatever we remembered, and it's not meant to be a performance. It's just very casual, like you'd sit in your pajamas with a cup of hot cocoa, and you're just telling the story to each other as best as you can remember it. And it might be that, you know, it gets out of order, or it might be that you add other bits. Like when I first told this story to my colleagues, I remember one of them added in this whole, all this detail about the mango fruit, you know, which I've now incorporated a little bit of that into how I tell the story. But, you know, just about all of the journey that the mango fruit had been on to become this luscious, ripe fruit. So you could get creative. You could bring in another part of the tree that hasn't been mentioned in the story. or yeah, just feel free to have a play with it. And we're nearly at the session end, so you'll have let's say about 8 minutes to tell the story to each other, 8 to 10 minutes. And if you could send them again, any questions before you go into your breakout rooms? Okay, so I wish I could be a fly on the wall in your breakout rooms, but I'm hoping I'll hear back from you at the end how it's been for you. And yeah, have fun, just play with it, experiment, mess it up, do whatever you want, but yeah, just have a good time telling the story to each other. Back, everyone. Yeah, well, welcome back, everyone. And this is a chance to just reflect together. What did you notice? What did you notice and appreciate about how others in your breakout room told the story? And what did you notice about the experience for yourself of retelling the story?
I noticed that we have a marvelous storyteller in Joanne, because she really she gave it such enthusiasm, and it was wonderful. Her voice and everything was fantastic. I can just imagine her children enjoying bedtime with her. And then Carla also was getting into practicing to tell a story to her grandchildren. So I think as you get into as you start telling the story, you sort of get into it and you get more animated, and you kind of get into the storytelling, which is fantastic. And I just wanted to share, my husband's had to leave, but Jim, after doing his beautiful tree here like this, he was saying,
Beautiful.
he was saying that the one aspect that he would add is the shade, because he said it's in the shade of the tree that we all meet as community to talk. And he mentioned when I did my project, my first community project many years ago in Swaziland, I had no office, I had no building or anything, and we used to meet under the tree. I would drive up to the village, I'd park my little car in the shade of the tree, and people would just gather. And so that's where every aspect of the tree, the same as the wood wide web, which I love the concept of that. The shade creates that whole space for us all to be able to sit in safety and share and gather everybody together, so that we can then build community in the shade.
Yeah, I love that, and that sense of that holding space in which everything is held.
Yeah.
Thank you. And something else that you said just reminded me that, one of the things about oral storytelling, which we talk about, is the mirror neurons. So the more vividly you can see the story in your own mind, the more real it will become for the people you're telling it to. Yes, go ahead, Marilyn.
I felt like I just picked up the bones and sort of described the bones, but I really like where Howard and Dee took it, because they branched out. Sorry for that. Sorry. And they talked about the ecosystem and actually the forest around the tree, and I think that was really beautiful, and in relation to community as well.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, that would be another way you could enrich that story, is, maybe this is a young tree where all the parts are arguing with each other, and maybe there's an older tree nearby that sends some stories along the mycelium pathways that let the tree know. Howard, what did you notice and appreciate?
Well, I really like the way Dee kind of swept, like she came, jumping in at the end and sort of enhanced our understanding of what we were talking about previously. The last one, not even the one we were in, like the second breakout group, when we were talking about forests, and all of a sudden Dee just took the forest to from like 1.0 discussion to like 5.0 discussion with how trees relate to each other, and how they they all have a role in in their height and all kinds of stuff. I don't know. It's a little late here, as I said in our meeting, but I just like the way someone else can come in and sort of add to the story that's being developed, the narrative, without having even been in the prior conversation. So it was beautiful.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Sounds like a rich conversation and story sharing. I wish I could be in the breakout rooms as well. I'm just going to share some hearth storytelling tips that you can download from the chat that you can take away with you. And yeah, there's just a few ideas there of not just the ones we've explored today, but other things that you can do, like taking your story for a walk, going gossiping your story with others. Anyone else here who'd like to share something about their experience? Be brave.
Oh yeah, I'll be brave. I think storytelling is maybe like singing, and a lot of people think they can't do it, but really everyone can do it, and it's just about practicing and having a go. And I think you really showed that in this workshop. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Joanne. That's really most of all what I hoped for, because I didn't get that when I began my journey. I thought that, you know, it was this like performance art. And my friend Melissa just really showed me just how accessible and how quickly all of us can become and grow our confidence as storytellers. So that's what I most hope for all of you, is to go out and just feel confident about exploring and playing with and experimenting with your storytelling voice and telling stories to your children, your grandchildren, your friends. It's such a great way to spend time together. So we just have a couple more minutes. If anyone else, I think Carla, you were about to speak.
Yes, well, it was such a joy to me to listen to people who really know how to tell stories and to get inspired, and to hear your last comment there, to tell story to your friends as well. It never occurred to me to tell stories to your friends, but I'd love to do that. I'd love to do that, and I think I would enjoy that very much. Yeah. I love this whole thing about storytelling. Becoming more enamored of it all the time. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, maybe just for the last minute, if you can just pop an intention or a reflection in the chat, something that you'd like to take away with you, or where you'd like to go next with your own storytelling journey. And yeah, I just encourage you all to go out and tell stories, play, have fun. So Marilyn said, I think it is something that we can use to help the community share their stories. Definitely. And that's what I've seen. The people I work with here in Kwinana, some of them didn't even know what a myth was when we began. You know, they hadn't been told fairy tales when they were children, and they just love them now. Yeah. Thank you, Jim. It was lovely to have you here. So I'll just read these aloud. So communities can craft stories on top of stories, from Howard. And D, continue to explore stories, tell stories, share stories. As Appreciative Inquiry says, stories stick like glue. Thanks for your wisdom. And Carla, it could even be used to introduce myself to others in meetings. Joanne said, everyone's voice is unique, and so is their storytelling. Beautiful. Perfect place to end. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy, have fun with the rest of Unconference, and I'll see you around.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola.
Thank you. Everyone has a story from Kate. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks to everyone.
So can I